Okay, hello, Mesopotamia. So, hi, this is Dr. Black, this is Elias. Elias will be helping us today. Anyway, Mesopotamia. So, Mesopotamia is the Greek name for a region roughly in modern day Iraq between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Um, Mesopotamia means between the rivers in Greek. That's not what the people whose civilizations arose there called it, because Greek didn't exist as a language at that time. So they had a variety of names for it. But anyway, the reason that we care about it in this context is that Mesopotamia was uh, one of the sites where we see some of the earliest uh, evidences of what we want to call civilization. It's kind of a chauvinistic term, culturally chauvinistic, but that's what we're going to be going with. So, what's so special about Mesopotamia? Why do we see some of the earliest signs of civilization in Mesopotamia? Well, the first thing is this. Mesopotamia, as well as some other river valleys or river floodplains, like the Yellow River floodplain in China, which is a lovely country, that part of the country, and the Indus River Valley in India, um, and the Nile River floodplain in Egypt. These are all places that are what have been traditionally called cradles of civilization. Now, why are they called that? Well, think about what a cradle is. A cradle is a nice, safe place to put a baby. It's nurturing. It's safe from harm. It's where you want to put the baby when you want the baby to be okay, rather than, say, a death trap of civilization, where you want to put the. Anyway, we've wandered a little bit. Um, so it Mesopotamia is what we call a cradle of civilization, as well as these other river valleys. We see civilization, we see writing, large scale agriculture, development of bronze, things like that, large cities for the first time. We see these develop in these places around the same time, somewhere around 3500 to 3000 BCE, so about 5,000 to 5,500 years ago. We see these civilizations arising. Okay, fine. He objects to the term cradle of civilization. We see these civilizations arising in these places that we call cradles of civilization around the same time historically, because these cradles of civilization are what you might call easy mode for agriculture. They are all roughly around the same around the same latitude on the planet. They have very similar climates. They are warm with long growing seasons. They have access to fresh water because all of these places are in river floodplains or river valleys. They have rich soil that you can grow in because, again, river floodplains and river valleys. And therefore, they are, if you're going to do large scale agriculture and have it succeed and get a big enough population going for interesting stuff to start happening, like cities and writing and so forth, if you're going to do large scale agriculture and have it succeed, it's going to be in one of these places. So largely, now there's another element to it that I'm leaving out. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But largely, we see the first signs of civilization in these places that we call cradles of civilization. We see the first signs of civilization in these places because they are the places where the conditions for agriculture are most favorable. Okay. So, this raises a couple of questions. Why am I equating civilization with agriculture? Why am I equating one with the other? Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So, around 10,000 years ago, at the end of the Pleistocene era, coming into the Holocene era, you have a dramatic shift in the climate of the Earth. Everything got a lot warmer. Glaciers began retreating by melting. They weren't just picking up and leaving. They didn't just go, well, gotta go, bye. The glaciers were retreating in the sense that they were melting off because everything was getting warmer. This was releasing a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. In other words, things were getting better for agriculture. Humans had, you know from the last video, that humans had existed as hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years. But humans aren't stupid. They figured out that, probably fairly early, that when they got rid of the seeds of the plants that they ate, the fruits that they ate and things like that, when they tossed them in the trash pile or what have you, the new plants would develop from this. They understood the concept of agriculture pretty early on, probably. And we have some archaeological evidence that there were early attempts to grow plants on purpose. That is, early attempts at agriculture that predate the Holocene era. The problem is, climate-wise, it just wasn't super easy to get that working. Until, again, about 10,000 years ago, with the shift from the Pleistocene era to the Holocene era, and conditions start getting more favorable overall. Now, so imagine it. In the whole world, the climate is changing to make things better for agriculture. And then in these cradles of civilization, you have the absolute tippy top, best possible conditions for agriculture. So imagine basically a bunch of humans, early humans, all over the place, trying their best. They're still hunter-gatherers for the most part. They may be pastoralists. They may be herding animals to supplement their hunting and gathering. But they're trying their best to launch some sort of agricultural enterprise, to grow plants under their own control so they have a reliable source of food, rather than having to just hunt and gather and hope they wind up with what they need. So you can imagine these early humans, they're all over the place, they're all trying to get agriculture going. Who's going to succeed? Obviously, the people who are doing it in the easy mode area, the cradle of civilization, or the cradles of civilization. Okay, so hopefully you're all with me so far on that. So, that brings us to the connection between agriculture and civilization. So, when people started shifting over to agriculture in these cradles of civilization like Mesopotamia, they started to build settled communities. Remember in the previous video we talked about all the things that you don't have in a hunter-gatherer society. Even if they have a base of operations from which they proceed out to hunt and gather, these are usually only semi-permanent dwellings. These are people who are on the move a lot of the time, and you don't have a great deal of accumulation of stuff. You don't have social classes because there's no material way to distinguish between them. You don't have specialization of skills. Because everyone is involved in hunting and gathering, pretty much. As people started to make transitions to agriculture, they started to develop settled communities. They built permanent dwellings. They stored objects. They stored possessions. They had excess food that they could use to get them through lean times when the crop didn't come in as well. They could begin to do things that required specialized skills, because now the entire population does not need to be farming in order to feed everyone. There can be people who devote their time, rather than farming, to other stuff like pottery or weaving or skills that fighting, for instance, things like that. So agriculture is the first link in the chain, the first step, if you will, to developing what we think of as civilization. And specifically, for our purposes, when we use that term, we're going to mean urban population, non-farming city dwellers, a diversity of skills, and writing. And we're going to get to that in a second. Writing is going to be especially important for this. But anyway, they began to develop these small Neolithic, that is to say New Stone Age communities that were settled and didn't move around all the time, and they began to develop the features of civilization. Some people had more stuff than other people, because now they can accumulate stuff in their settled dwellings. And so there are some people who are of a higher social class, they are wealthier, and there are some people who are less wealthy. They began to develop patriarchy, that is to say the predominance of men in society, because controlling women's reproduction became super important when having more children turned from a relative disadvantage in a hunter-gatherer community, because you got more little mouths to feed that don't contribute, to a relative advantage in an agricultural community, because more kids equals more free farm labor. So you start developing these complex, stratified societies. But they still weren't super large societies at this point. Because remember, this is 10,000 years ago we're talking, 8,000 BCE or so. And I've been saying that the earliest civilizations in Mesopotamia arose about 3,500 BCE. So that's 5,000 years unaccounted for there. A difference of 5,000 years. So during that 5,000 years, after humans started practicing agriculture and started to develop these settled societies, but did not have highly complex, or they started to develop more complexity and stratification, but they did not reach the level that we would call civilization. During that time, the reason that these communities stayed relatively small is that they were still using stone tools. This is still the Stone Age. It's the last part of the Stone Age, but it is still the Stone Age, the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age. So I don't know if you've ever tried to use a rock to carve anything or to plow the fields or something like that. I'm guessing you have. Surely everyone remembers your early days trying to plow fields with rocks. Okay, no, maybe just me. Obviously, it's not very efficient. It's not very effective. These communities had managed to sort of get a toehold into agriculture, but they weren't really flourishing yet. They were still relatively small. The key difference is bronze. So agriculture is one of the key building blocks of civilization. You need to have agriculture. But bronze is the next key building block in agriculture. Um, Bronze is made from 9 parts copper and 1 part tin. It's an alloy. It is a copper-like material that is harder and can maintain its shape more easily than copper. As a result, you can fashion bronze into effective tools in the positive, constructive side of it, or into weapons and armor in the negative and destructive side of it. When the small agricultural societies that existed in the Neolithic period, when some of them, because not all of them did, you can look up Scarabrai or the Natufian culture or something like that. These were small Stone Age agricultural societies that never discovered bronze and eventually died out. When some of these small agricultural societies discovered bronze, they made a quantum leap forward in terms of not only their ability to do work by plowing fields and creating finished goods with bronze tools, but also in their ability to inflict violence on each other with the use of bronze weapons and armor. So I want you to imagine the situation. You are in a culture, a small agricultural society. It already has layers of social stratification. There are some people who are more wealthy than others, and some people who have more resources than others, and some people who are dirt poor farmers and things like that. I want you to imagine this, and I want you to imagine that this new technology is emerging. Bronze, they're figuring out how to make bronze. Who is going to get the bronze weapons and armor? The people who already have a lot of resources, obviously. The rich get richer, so to speak. With the new technology that comes out, the people who are best positioned to take advantage of it are the people who are already best positioned in society. So they glom on to this use of bronze tools and weapons, and they are going to become thus even more powerful. Not only because of their ability to use bronze tools to get more out of their farms and get more out of their their craftsmanship, but they're also going to use bronze weapons and armor to oppress and control the agricultural production of people around them. Okay, so you can see this, hopefully in your mind's eye, that you've got these powerful figures in these early, Neolithic, New Stone Age agricultural societies. They get a hold of bronze weapons and armor and tools, and they start taking control of their whole region. They start unifying the agricultural production in their area, bringing it under their control. Well, sooner or later, you're going to start controlling the agricultural production of a sizable area, a very sizable area, enough that now you can, by controlling the flow of food, the output of the agricultural endeavors, by controlling the flow of food, you can have a very large non-farming population. Where does that non-farming population live? Well, it's easiest to concentrate them in one area, and a large non-farming population concentrated in an area, well, gosh golly, that's just a city. That's a city. That's an urban population. So bronze gives us the ability to concentrate agricultural output to the point where you can have a large urban population. And if you're controlling that much agricultural product at once, you need a way to track it. You need a way to keep track of all of it. Maybe when in the New Stone Age, the Neolithic period, maybe it wasn't necessary, to keep careful records because there was not enough agricultural product for anyone to lose track of what they had. And every family was sort of tracking its own output. But now you have a centralized authority based in the power of these bronze weapons and armor. You have a centralized authority that is tracking the output and tracking where the food is going and who is getting fed and who has access to this stuff. And that gives us writing. Yes, writing. I know that when you play Civ, writing is not connected to the discovery of bronze, but it should be. But no, yeah, that gives us writing. Writing, everywhere that writing is ever developed around the world, it develops out of early records for agriculture, keeping track of numbers of cows, bushels of wheat, and things like that. Everywhere that writing is ever developed, it's developed out of this need to keep track of large agricultural production, large-scale agricultural production. Everywhere that you have large-scale agricultural production coordinated by a central authority, it happens because of bronze. So, agriculture, badoom, and bronze, badoom, bump bump, together give us big cities. They give us a central authority that's controlling the agricultural production, and they give us writing. So that's what comes out of that. Now, I almost said out of reflex, because I'm used to giving this lecture to a class, I almost said, are there any questions? You can't hear me. You probably have questions. I can't hear them or answer them, so we're going to just scream into the void. Anyway, I do it 2-3 times a day. Highly recommend it. Stress relieving. So, agriculture plus bronze gives us the trappings of civilization, centralized authority, urban populations, and writing. Writing will eventually develop in Mesopotamia. That was an interesting noise. One of the cats is being horrible, I'm sure. Okay. Thank you. Writing develops in Mesopotamia around 3,500 or so, with the Sumerians, who are the earliest of these Mesopotamian civilizations. Now, why do we call the Sumerians civilized, and we call that where civilization starts, and people like the Natufians not? Well, the Natufian culture flourished in what would now be Israel about 10,000 years ago, right at the beginning of this whole agriculture craze. And they flourished for about 1,000 years and then died out. But the main reason why we care so very much about the Sumerians and less about the Natufians isn't because, one of them is more worthy. It's simply because the Natufians left behind artifacts and they left behind stuff that we can study. But since they left behind no writing, because writing had not been invented yet, because they were a Neolithic society, because they left behind no writing, we don't know as much about them. We can't get a look inside their heads. The Natufians are a fascinating people. They had trade networks that were very extensive. We can tell because they had jewelry that used shells and other types of things that didn't come from anywhere near where they lived, which means they had to trade for them across hundreds and hundreds of miles. These trade networks were extended. So they had trade networks. They lived in these sort of communal settlements. They changed in the way they buried their dead over the course of the time that they existed. Early on, their dead were buried shallow and without any grave goods, but over the course of the existence of the Natufian culture, they began to bury their dead deeper in the ground, and they would bury tools and jewelry and weapons with their dead, valuable things. So they you weren't just throwing this stuff away. They buried their dead with this stuff. Why did they do that? Did they believe that their dead were taking these things into the afterworld? Guess what? We'll never know! Because the Natufian people did not have writing. We have no idea. We will never know what they believed. We can make guesses and inferences, but we'll never know exactly what was going on with them. So the reason that we care about writing so very much, and the reason why we call Sumeria and other cultures that developed in this time period, that developed writing in this time period, the reason we call these the beginnings of civilization is because that's sort of the earliest we can go back and really get a glimpse inside the heads of these people who lived there. So, civilization is equated here with an early society that had agriculture, and it had bronze, and it had writing. And it had writing because it had a bunch of agricultural production, which it had because of bronze. That brings us to the last bit, which is the central authority. As I said, as bronze technology was developed independently by these various civilizations in their various cradles of civilization, it is inevitable that somebody would gain an advantage, an upper hand, just because stuff isn't evenly distributed. It was inevitable that somebody who already had a material advantage when bronze came along would begin to use their material advantage to use the bronze weapons and armor to dominate their fellows. So basically what we're saying is, as bronze comes onto the scene and it becomes possible to build this kind of power base, this dominion over your local area, somebody's going to do it. There's going to be power struggles. And we see this in Egypt, we see this in early China, we see this in Mesopotamia. That you have this struggle to become the ruler of a sizable area and to coordinate the agricultural production in that area to your benefit. These early rulers were called autocrats, A-U-T-O-C-R-A-T, autocrat. They were autocrats. They're called autocrats because they drove around in cars. No, I'm kidding. Not at all the reason. Autocracy just means self and rule from the self, auto self. Crat is cognate to the Greek word for rulership. Kratos. The autocrat was someone whose rule and authority was embodied in themselves. Now we're going to talk next time a little bit about the religious basis for this. I don't want to get into that right now. But the autocrat was an all-powerful ruler. We're not talking about a democratically elected ruler or someone who shared power with a senate or anything like that. Right now we're talking about someone who just rules. Why are they in charge? Because they say so. What is the law? Whatever they say it is. That's the theory of autocracy, that there's just somebody who has all the power of rulership in this society in themselves, and that's it. There's no more complex social organization involved. That's an autocrat. So why does why do we see autocrats arising in all of these cradles of civilization? Well, for the reasons I just laid out, really. Um, you have agriculture. Bronze makes it possible to not only have agriculture that's more productive, but it makes it possible for whoever has the bronze to take control over a large area of agriculture and control all of that output, all of that product. Um, so what you wind up with is you've got people fighting for control, and eventually someone is going to achieve it, and they're going to achieve dominance over this whole area, over all this agricultural production, and they use the advantage of that status, that economic control, to keep themselves in power. It doesn't always work. Autocrats get overthrown sometimes, or become weak and lose control, what have you. But the theory is there, the basic idea that somebody's in charge because somebody always wants to be in charge. That's just how it is. Somebody always wants to be in charge, and if they have enough bronze and enough bloodlust, they'll take charge. And then when you have enough of that, when you have a sizable enough power base that you've created by controlling agricultural production, you incidentally develop writing as a way of keeping track of all your resources that you control. So this is where autocrats in these early civilizations come from. They come out of the mixture of agriculture plus bronze. These autocrats grow up and develop out of that. And all of the early societies we see in the history of the planet, all of these early agricultural societies that develop bronze, they all wind up with autocrats, these all-powerful god kings that rule everything. That's how it happens. So, okay. Obviously, religion is a hugely important part of this, and the role that religion plays in Mesopotamian life is going to be important. It's something that I want to talk about, and it's going to play an important role in their theory about why they have autocrats that they do. But I'm going to talk about that next time. And so hopefully this was helpful to you and useful in some way, and I will see you, one hopes. No, I'll definitely see you on Monday. So take care, be well, and I'm still just recuperating here, but I'll be there on Monday. Okay, bye.